Hi, it's Winton Churchill with the Barefoot Consultants, and welcome to our Freelance Friday call. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the fear factor that I encounter among so many boomers about working online. And it's interesting, usually when we have a conversation, their fear level drops a little bit because, uh, the world has changed. It's much easier now to work with online systems like Upwork and that kind of thing, where you can do freelancing. And one of the biggest things that people look at is, where do I get jobs from? I was on one of the networks earlier this morning, and there were over 8,000 jobs for proofreading assignments. That's just open today, and usually those jobs are posted, and people go through and they do them over the next week or 10 days or 2 weeks, the smaller ones. And there's another sort of continuous flowing river there. But the first thing that people mostly react to is they say, hey, I don't know enough about computers to work online. Isn't that pretty tricky? Don't I need to know how to program and that sort of thing? And while it is true that 20 years ago, the networks like Upwork and Freelancer and Guru.com and Fiverr all were started kind of in the age of build me a website, write me a computer program. And that brought a lot of technical people to the world of freelancing. And it was not a world that was reachable or attainable by us mere mortals that don't know how to program computers and that kind of thing. So what has happened in the intervening 20 years, really, for these systems is that they have gotten so much easier. An online network programming site, looked pretty difficult 20 years ago. But now when you go onto these sites, it's more or less like looking at a Google page with a few extra options, a few ways to sort things that you might not see on a Google page. It's not much more complicated than setting up an Amazon account and buying from it in some ways, managing the transaction. And I guess that you probably know a lot of how to do that stuff already. And so that's something to recognize, that you're using a computer every day to do some things. And I see Tom coming in. Good to see you, Tom. Glad you're here. Haven't seen you in a while. I know we missed a couple times ago, but good to see you. And let's see who else is. Sometimes they let me see who's in the room, and sometimes they don't. So, Bob, if you're there, just say hi. Always good to see you. And so this fear about not knowing enough about computers, if you compare what you know today to what you knew 20 years ago, and if you didn't account for the fact that most of the money spent in developing systems like some of the ones we recommend working on has gone into streamlining the user interface for people. And what they don't know is that on many of these systems, 20 to 25% of all the freelancers working in the system are of 50 plus or baby boomer age. And so lots of people out there, they're not programmers, they're not database experts, they're not web developers. I mean, certainly some of those are there, but they're doing things like proofreading, like helping people do PowerPoint presentations, like helping volunteer organizations do fundraising or create newsletters or figure out ways to talk to their audience better. And they're helping people that have special interest. It could be an interest in coin collecting or baseball, or quilting is something that's incredibly popular. You wouldn't think that a freelance job would have the phrase quilting in it, but if you go into all the different websites that we talk about, you'll see that quilting is a very popular inquiry. People want articles. They want the articles proofread. They want blog postings. They want pictures of work that people have done. So lots of different ways to get in there and do that. Yeah, good, Tom. Very good. Yeah, I think that's what happened. You arrived right at the end last week, and just as all the systems were shutting down on my end, it's like your automatic garage door closing. You don't want to, or can't, in the case of Upwork and StreamYard, you can't jump under the door at the last minute, or I would have. So this fear is not something you need to have. It's something that you need to take a look at these networks and see if there's a kind of work you can do on there. And if you had a career, did a job for 10, 20, 30 years, maybe 40, you have lots of career expertise. And the expertise that you're able to bring to this audience is not your technical expertise, but it's the knowledge and the wisdom that you've cultivated. The challenge for most people is they don't know how to cultivate that knowledge, or not so much cultivate it. They've already cultivated, but not how to round it up and put it in a format that somebody can understand who wants to hire you, what your skill set is, what kind of what terrain you've covered really in your career, what industries you were in, what things you learned, what job positions you were in. Were you managing projects? Were you supervising employees? Were you an individual contributor? Were you an engineer? Just beginning to understand what that is, because anybody that's paid any attention over particularly the last 3 years knows that freelancing has surged in terms of its popularity and is an acceptable way to get stuff done. There was a time, 3 years ago and before, that often I would have to explain to somebody that owned a business why they would want to use a freelancer instead of hire an employee. You get somebody that's more flexible. They can come in at the time they need to do work, and then they disappear when they don't. One of the popular examples that I use is the idea of a person that helps a company with their trade show events or conferences. They might be going to 1 or 2 conferences a year. They don't need somebody full-time on staff, borrowing an employee from their staff who might be pretty good at doing that kind of thing, but they have other responsibilities, versus bringing in a freelancer that's very efficient at doing those kinds of things and bringing them in for a couple months, twice a year, in order to do a really bang-up job and not distract the other employees from doing their jobs. And you get somebody that's usually got a history of doing event stuff for decades. And so that's a big plus when you're able to go back in your history, go back decade by decade, and think about what are the kind of things that you've done. Then the other aspect is you want to think about, in combination of that, is places that you've had to be resilient. What happened along the way that taxed your ability to be resilient, that really you had to innovate, you had to figure out new ways to do things? And of course, the last 2 years has been the perfect example for that. Just how to work from home, how to communicate with people. Many of you probably learned how to use Zoom in that period of time. So that's just something to consider, that you've had many times like that in your life. If I was a young new person at a company called Ryder Truck Rental. They used to, or they still do, rent the yellow trucks, but most of the trucks they rent are the ones that are painted up for a company, and then the company leases those trucks. That's the bulk of their business. And we lived through the fuel crisis of 1972, had to come up with all kinds of innovative ways to get people where they're going. Hey, Doug, how you doing? Good to see you. And I see somebody else there, but it just says Facebook user. So if you are so moved to type your name in there, I can see who you are and say hello. So understanding decade by decade, or job transition by job transition, when we do this project in workshops, what we do is we have people start with the jobs that they're in, and then go back, well, what was the job you had before that, and before that, and before that? And pretty soon you got a half a dozen career moves. In my case, it would be 13. About a third of those happened not because I went to a different company, but the company that I was with was merged or spun off or something like that. So lots of reasons that many of us have a long and varied work history based on the companies that we work for. And then the third biggest fear in sequence here, but this may be the biggest one overall, is how do you find jobs? And just let's see, I was going to look at this morning. Let me just take one look to give you an example, because I want to give you a live example here. But you can go in and see how many jobs there are on any given day. And today there's over 200,000. It's actually 201,724 jobs today. And out of all those jobs, let's take a look at the number of those that would be proofreading jobs. And this is one of the popular places to start. I know it wouldn't be a good place to start for me because I'm not a good proofreader. Kind of in the spirit of Winston Churchill used to say, I think, let's see, what was it? He said, write drunk, edit sober. And that was apparently how he kind of approached the thing. And, that works for somebody. It wouldn't work for me because I'm not very good at that kind of thing, the drinking part. But it is a way to, the idea of that there's a lot of people out there that are very creative and they want to do stuff, and they need somebody to kind of come behind them and clean up their work. And the kind of stuff that they write, they're able to write very prolifically, but it needs lots of cleanup. And that's one of the reasons that there's so many proofreading assignments on these networks. And when I tap this in, we're going to see how many jobs are out there that involve proofreading. There's over 7,100 jobs today where somebody's looking for a proofreader. And these are some of the very interesting ways that people get started. There are also customer service jobs. And a lot of people I talk to say, well, I really don't want to do customer service. Their vision of customer service is sitting in a small cubicle, talking on the phone all day, or answering emails all day, or that kind of thing. And customer service is a very different animal today. Most companies, most nonprofits, most government agencies have had to really up the level of how they're going to be working with their clients, where they're going to be positioning their employees to meet whatever needs need to be met. And in many cases, it's far different than it was just 3 years ago. They're servicing companies, their customers, wherever they live in an office. It's interesting. Early in my career, I was involved in the sales of technology products, and that was very much a get in your car and drive out to, the big manufacturer, the big research and development facility, and explain what you had to offer, oftentimes doing live demonstrations and that kind of thing. And now there's not so much of that anymore. Between COVID and all the other restrictions and lockdowns and that kind of thing, that went away pretty fast, and people found that they were able to do not all, but a lot of those demonstrations online. And especially when you can bring in video showing, say, a product actually working or how a particular service works, it's very easy to share that, with, I don't know, half a dozen to a dozen people a day or more. And in the old days, you used to have to, drive to every place. And it was a great day if you could see 2 clients a day between going out, driving out to where they were, setting up, checking in, setting everything up, showing them what you were doing some question and answer, and then packing everything out and moving to the next destination. And you probably wanted to get lunch between your morning appointment and your afternoon appointment, so you did. And 2 appointments in a day, very good. 3 appointments in a day, spectacular. Every once in a while you show up for an appointment and nobody's there, and so all that time is wasted. Where now with Zoom you can just go click, 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 and you're going to see half a dozen, maybe a dozen people in a day that you're able to speak very personal, in a very personable way. You're going to be able to have question and answered. You're not going to necessarily be fatigued by the arduous driving you used to have to do particularly in the field of technology. It was a good business. Some of the early computers that I sold cost over $1 million, and the people that could buy $1 million computer in the late 70s, early 80s were few and far between. So you did a lot of road time. I could do sometimes 200 or 300 miles a day to go to talk to a particular client, and think about how our world has changed. It's just completely different now. And you're not turning in those miles, and you're not wearing out a car, and you're really getting down to discussing what that particular client needs and how you put that together. And so if you've got experience in an industry, that's another thing to note. That's a domain of knowledge. If you have a hobby that you practice, whether it's coin collecting or something like that, or quilting, you can go in and find jobs that relate around that. One of the questions that we like to ask people when we're doing a profile for them, because we help people do their profiles, because just like me, I always put off doing my resume, and I stayed at a number of jobs way too long because it just was hard to write that darn resume. And so we have a service where we do that for you, and it just sort of gets you all set up and hands you the keys to go racing around on that freelance highway where all the freelance jobs are. This one company that I'm looking at, I think they shove about over $2 billion a year in transactions through their system. So those transactions are coming in, they're paying out to the freelancers that are doing those things, and then they take a small piece of the payout to fund. That's how they make their money. So they're really interested in making it easy for the buyer and easy for the freelancer to find each other and work together online. So the where to find jobs answer has never been an easier one than it is today. So Bob says, you might have me beat on the number of jobs in my career, but it's good that you haven't been sat down and counted them all. That's something to do at one of those sunsets there after you come up from a dive. So yeah, that's that is. I had to actually, I probably would have never figured it out either. But one time for one of my security clearances that I got right at the end of my career, I had to jump out there and do a new upgrade of my security clearance application, and it required that I go back actually to elementary school. So that was quite the feat. You need lots of memory juice to be able to figure that one out. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Lots of interesting new articles on this one I posted earlier on our website, but let me see if I can drop it in the text here. Sometimes it goes out to all the different places, and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm gonna see if I can figure my way into a screen share so I can show you what's going on. Here, 1 second. And we'll get the tab share, I guess, is what we're gonna do. This Bloomberg article, present, share screen, do that. No, that's not doing what I wanted to do. Keep moving these buttons around here. Extra slides. Let's see. Yeah, wow. StreamYard has changed their sharing. I'm sure you can do it, but I'm just not knowing how to do it now that they have changed this up. But the idea is that the Bloomberg article, you could look at it for yourself there in the chat, is talking about companies are hiring freelancers. And one of the questions I get a lot when I show that article, and I'm going to be in Atlanta this coming week to do a series of presentations and participation with the International Living Conference. And, in part, this is some of the topics we talk about, and people say, well, why would a company ever want to hire a freelancer instead of an employee? And there's, a billion reasons. I could probably easily tick off a dozen, but just a few of them are, it takes about 3 days to hire an employee on a freelance network. They can post a specific requirement for a freelancer. They can get that person working on the project within 3 days. The challenge when you hire an employee is there's all kinds of legal things that go on, as there are with freelancers. All the legal stuff is protected on these networks, so you are being compliant, and the employer is being compliant, and that kind of thing. But when you hire an employee, they are typically involved and enrolled in employee benefits and all kinds of things that don't come with freelancing. The freelancer pays their own version of whatever they do, or if they're a moonlighting freelancing in their day job, they have all those insurances, or maybe a spouse carries the insurance with a day job, and then that leaves the other partner free to go out and freelance and cover the greatest background fear of being a freelancer is, how do I get my medical care paid for, or how do I do that? And the great news is there's so many people freelancing now that there are lots of good solutions to the medical insurance situation. And of course, many of the people in our programs, as they come through our programs and they reach age 65, I guess, they're eligible for Medicare. So, Medicare solves that problem very, very handily when you get to that age. And it's great when people do that. And then there's times where you have to figure out how all that fits together on your way through the process. So happy to answer any questions you might have about the article or that kind of thing. And the way this works, and you're a baby boomer, 50 plus, you probably lived through this before. When you go through hard times like the recessions that we have been through in our lives, and things like 9/11, what they call, I guess, black swan events, where something happens that really changes the way we do things. That we recover from those, and that's one of the things I hear about people, freelance buyers hiring people now as freelancers, as they really appreciate that resilience. You've been through bad times. You've had to, put Humpty Dumpty together again. You came into the office like all of us did the day after the 9/11, and everything was different. And of course, it was still weeks before we really even understood what had happened, what transpired, and all the different parameters. And there's still many question marks about what happened and to this day. But what we're seeing is you figured it out. Whatever company you were working for, nonprofit or whatever it might be, everybody had to figure out some new stuff, but they were able to do it as they as they came into the office and started putting everything back together again. And that's the resilience that I've heard so much recently over the last 2.5 years anyway, that buyers that hire freelancers appreciate. They have a big picture perspective. They may be doing a small part of a project like proofreading, but they know that the company might be on a deadline for getting their web page up. And if that proofreading doesn't get done in time, the web page doesn't go up in time, or the website, or whatever it might be. And so this is something that really is characteristic of those in the 50 plus crowd that typically understand that sense of urgency is not just you have to get your piece of the project done by this date. And too often freelancers take that as a suggestion rather than as a hard deadline. And again, those of us that are 50 plus had the gift of having to meet a lot of deadlines along the way. And when we didn't, we saw the consequences. So we know that. And a lot of people employed in the freelance field today don't really get what freelancing is all about. And Bob says, yeah, this is a good quote here. I think of freelancing as a form of outsourcing for companies and people. If it's not their core competency, then it's better to outsource it to someone or a company that it is their core competency. And that's the fact. So many people think that freelancing is where you have to go and earn low wages. And just the opposite is true. People that love to hire freelancers love to hire somebody who's an expert in their area, or it's not their first rodeo. And that's what we, one of the analogies that we use is that you know how to put together things. They can give you a short list of what they need done, and you can fill in some of the detail or all of the detail, that kind of thing. That comes up again and again, that freelance buyers like baby boomers because they know how to fill in the detail. They don't need to go back to the person that awarded them the job and ask them every little question about how to do this and how to do that. Of course, that can have consequences if you don't do it quite right. You don't want to get ahead of the project and the person you're working with. But again, from a relationship standpoint, 50 plus and baby boomers are more likely to pick up the phone and have a conversation to clarify something so that you can move forward with that without getting too far off the path. And that option is very much available to you and very much a part of what you're able to do. But a lot of freelancers today will just plow ahead and do the work and turn it in, and the person they're working for say this isn't quite right. In most cases, the freelancer will redo it. But our goal is to help train freelancers to be in the loop with their freelance buyer and actually provide that, open that feedback cycle and build that relationship. And yes, even pick up the phone at times, or certainly jump on a Zoom call or something like that. So that's pretty much what I've got for today. Look forward to seeing some of you on our next Tuesday night call. And a number of you I know are coming to Atlanta. I've already talked to a few or going back and forth on email. So we're going to be getting together when I'm there on the 21st, Friday, next Friday, week from today, week from right now. We'll be in Atlanta, and we've got all day 6-hour webinar going on Friday, and then we have a training session going on Saturday, and then another one on Sunday. So and lots of chance in between. And I'm seeing Diane says thank you. Good to see you, Diane. Thanks for stopping by. And good to see Bob, and hope to see you at soon, if not in person, virtually. So thanks for coming by today. Take care.